A landlord in San Francisco found a legal way to increase the rent of a rent controlled unit by 77%, but tenants are very upset about it. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of San Francisco. So, obviously, San Francisco is not a pro landlord place, it is a very anti landlord place. So, a landlord there figured out a way to be able to increase the rent on their rent controlled unit by 77%, right? And the real thing is that they followed the law, they did everything legally. It doesn't look good, when you read the story, but read a little bit further into the story and you start to realize, hey, landlord had to do what they had to do. Okay, they created the laws with the rent control and they didn't see this scenario, and if the landlord doesn't take advantage of the situation right now, well, they will lose out on tens of thousands of dollars in rent going into the future. So I'm in agreement with the landlord for doing this. You'll have to make your own decision as I go through the story and figure out, hey, is this the right thing or was this the wrong thing to do at this time? So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Now, let's just suppose that you are a landlord and you own a unit in a rent controlled area, right? And maybe you really do own a rent controlled unit, right? So let's say that there was something that was legal to do, right, but wouldn't necessarily be considered socially acceptable to do in order to increase your rents up to the much closer to the market level. Would you do it? That's a question. Should you have a big heart and let the tenant pay less just because you feel bad for them? Or should you do everything possible to make sure that your business stays, keeps running? Okay. So obviously, you know what my answer is, right? Yeah, the tenant's going through a hard time, but that isn't my problem. And even if I help this tenant out, it will hurt me in the long run. So yes, I am going to do whatever is possible. So you just put in the comments what you think, but you're gonna have to hear the story first before you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. This article is coming from missionlocal.org, and it says, domestic violence survivor lost rent control and faces eviction. Okay, so just from the title alone, you already know where I'm going with this. So let's get into it. Martha Gutierrez thought her problems were over. In 2020, she was granted a restraining order against her now ex-husband for domestic violence, forcing him to move out of their one-bedroom apartment and leave her in peace. Now that departure likely leads to her eviction. Wednesday evening, an attorney for Gutierrez's landlord confirmed that he is filing an eviction against her for non-payment of rent. The impending eviction case marks the final part of a months-long battle between Gutierrez and her landlord, the Reese family, about whether she can stay in her home. Advocates for Gutierrez point to the unusual and complex case as an example of blind spots in San Francisco tenant law. So right there, we start to see that, okay, the lady, she obviously was living with her now ex-husband, right, back in 2020. Domestic violence issue happens, and he has to move out, okay? But she's unable to afford the rent on her own. So now she owes the landlord money? Well, not exactly, not exactly. Let me continue with the story. Gutierrez's ex-husband was the only tenant listed on the lease of their rent-controlled apartment on San Bruno Avenue. When he vacated the apartment, per the restraining order, her landlord, Troy Reese, decided to legally revoke Gutierrez's rent control at her home of 23 years. That bumped her rent to $2,000 from $1,130 at present. Gutierrez said she cannot pay the difference. So yeah, basically their rent control law says that, hey, when the original person on the lease, right, if they vacate the property, well, you can raise the rent up to, I guess, the market level at that point. So now this apartment, rather than it being $1,130 a month, is going to be $2,000 a month. And that's $870 difference, 77% according to this article, right? And yes, that is a huge difference. That's almost double. I mean, not quite double, but you know what I'm saying, right? It is a substantial amount. We're talking about a 77% increase. And how long would it take to be able to get that rent increase otherwise? It would take a very long time. So, a lot of people, they're criticizing this landlord. They're like, oh my goodness, you're going after this domestic violence victim and, raising her rent dramatically, and she's not going to be able to pay it. And, from one perspective, you're like, okay, yeah, that's true. That's what it looks like on paper. I'll say it like that. But if you read further down into the article, that's where more truth about the situation starts to arise. But let me continue. I left crying. This man is going to throw me out, Gutierrez recalled telling her attorney after receiving an eviction notice for non-payment of rent in early June. I pray to God that I don't have to live on the streets. In April, the 65-year-old fought the rent increase in court, but an administrative law judge ruled the state's Costa-Hawkins Act, which permits landlords to reset the rent when an original tenant moves out. The rent increase was legal. Gutierrez appealed the case, but the city's Rent Board Commission upheld the ruling on May 16th, emphasizing she was never on the original lease. To Thomas Lelane, an attorney representing the Reeses, the decision was a long time coming. My clients are a hard-working black family, and they provide an apartment for Martha and her ex-husband with hardly any rent increases. And it says, this is a good point right here, right? Like, yeah, these landlords, they hardly ever had any rent increases before, but it's the time. This might be their only opportunity to do it, okay? I mean, so you have to take advantage of the laws that are in place. Otherwise, you're just going to be screwing yourself over. You're going to be permanently subsidizing this lady's housing costs. And I understand that she might not be able to afford it, right? But you have to have your own best interest in mind. Do you think she cares one crap about whether you're able to pay your bills or not? Of course not. Of course not. And the truth of the matter is, right, the domestic violence issue isn't what you would think it is, right? So let me skip down a little bit because they actually go into a little bit about the domestic violence issue, and it's a little bit enlightening here. Lelane, the Reese family attorney, painted a different picture. He alleged that Gutierrez initiated the fight when the domestic violence occurred. He said the ex-husband, 81, was accused of murder after the incident but was acquitted by a jury, which he reiterated in the rent litigation documents. So basically, right, the domestic violence, the husband was acquitted, found innocent, not guilty, okay? As it stands, following the appeal, Gutierrez must now pay $2,000 per month. The ruling was also applied retroactively to the years Gutierrez had paid the lower rent, meaning she now owes $14,000 in back rent or faces eviction for non-payment of rent. Though she's trying to find a job, Gutierrez can't afford that on her $1,110 disability checks, her only source of income presently, she said. Kroner said she has dipped into her savings to bridge the gap. As of Wednesday evening, Lelane was filing the official eviction papers if the parties don't settle, which as of Wednesday seemed unlikely. The case goes to court at a later date. So yeah, lady, she don't have a job. She can't afford. It says that she only gets $1,110 in disability, so she couldn't have afforded the rent control rent. Okay? This is a complete joke. She needs to go. She can't afford the place. She won't be able to pay the rent. She owes back rent on all the money that, all the discounts basically that she was getting before. It's over. Find somewhere else to live that you can afford, because these people, they should not have to keep you there and subsidize your living for the rest of your life.